Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a long time coming return guest, comedian Andrew Doyle. He's the man behind Titania McGrath. His most recent books include The New Puritans, How the Religion of Social Justice Captured the Western World, and Free Speech and Why It Matters. I think this was the first show you did once you got outed as being Titania
That
on
sounds right,
Twitter.
yeah. That sounds
So
about right. So that's a while ago now.
yes, it's been a minute. So, Andrew, you're back in London from the UK, from the States. Um, I wanted to have, I know you're from Northern Ireland. I wanted to have someone from the UK to break down what happened in British politics, because I think so many people tend to view the politics of other countries through the lens of their own. And I think a lot of people here on the right think, "Oh my God, Keir Starmer, it's going to be basically Stalinism." And I'm like this guy, to me, from the outside, just seems like a corporate hack. He seems like another Biden type, not in terms of mental acuity, but in terms of his predilections. And these types are far better at stifling the hardcore lefties than Rishi Sunak ever would be. So please break it down for us from the ground's eye.
Well, I'm surprised that you know who Keir Starmer is. I mean, I
Oh,
I I was in America last week, and people I spoke to didn't know who he was. They didn't know who Rishi Sunak was. There's a general sense that I don't know. Do people care about British politics in America?
well,
Interesting.
you know who I care about more than anyone, and I bring this person up at every opportunity for my American compatriots, who is now my queen. I know your queen is dead. My queen lives, the mother of the house, Diane Abbott, who is the greatest politician either in Great Britain or anywhere on earth. Just an absolute train wreck of a woman. Just mwah, chef's. She's Titania dipped in chocolate, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about Diana, but I think she's prone to gaffes. That's definitely the case. That is
Yes.
that is undeniable. I don't think even she would not deny it. But then sometimes there are unfair things. She was photographed on a train drinking a mojito from a can. Well, I've done stuff like that. It's just
Yeah.
that no one's interested when I do it. Why should we be interested when she does it? I
Right.
think it's a bit fair. And the other thing is she was, you know, one of the first black women to make it into parliament. She did achieve an awful lot, and at a time when it wasn't easy. So there's
And
all of that, but yeah,
her
she's bad at maths, she's bad at
her
arithmetic,
her
and
autobiography comes out in September. I'm going to be getting a copy, and this is something I delight to tell my friends from that side of the pond. There is actual footage on YouTube of Diane Abbott during Prime Minister questions asking Margaret Thatcher a question. So this is a real great Venn diagram if people are interested.
yeah, and Diane Abbott, of course, is part of that whole Corbynite left, so she's part
Yes.
of the sort of further left element of the Labour Party. Now, in terms of your question, so Keir Starmer's an interesting one. He has a background, a Trotskyist background. He has a sort of further left background than people assume. But the truth is, he's something of a technocrat. He
Yeah.
is, as you pointed out, very managerial. It's very difficult to pin down what he thinks about anything. He's known. It's become a bit of a cliche, but he's known for flip flopping. He's known for not knowing, or not, or for reversing on various decisions that he makes and various positions that he holds, and that, to the extent that people don't really know what he thinks about anything. I mean, I think he was one of the first politicians in the UK to kneel after the Black Lives Matter riots in America. And there's a very famous picture of him and Angela Rayner, who's another member of his cabinet, kneeling at that point. And so that he's very much a culture warrior, or at least he jumps on board these issues if he thinks that it is expedient, I suppose. The very fact that I can't tell you really what his opinion is on much. I mean, he started out in terms of culture war stuff. He started out by saying that, when he was asked whether a woman could have a penis, there's a really interesting interview with Nick Ferrari on LBC where he stammers for I think over a minute. He says, "Oh, he kind of panics. He gets that look of panic in his eye, the same look that you saw from Ketanji Brown Jackson when she was asked, what is a
Yeah.
woman? And she said, I'm not a biologist, now on the Supreme Court. So that's reassuring. But he had that moment of panic, as all politicians seem to do. But he's come forward since then. So recently he said that that 99.9% of women don't have penises. If you do the arithmetic in the UK, that means 33,500 female penises in this country alone, which is a lot of female penises, I would have thought. But he is getting there gradually. He's sort of tiptoeing towards that 100% number, which every 5-year-old knows. He'll get there eventually, but in the meantime, he's going to be serving as our prime minister. Whether he's So he's made since he's been in charge of Labour, and of course Labour is meant to be the left wing party. It's called Labour for for a good reason. It's about the working classes, about the working people. It's been for quite some time now a very middle class party, a party that
Yes.
has failed to help the working classes or prioritize their needs. So much so that really, at the last general election, the Conservative Party, the right wing party, were really widely seen as the party of the working class. You've got a very similar dynamic going on in the US, where
Yes.
Trump is seen very much as the working class man, as
If I
opposed.
may add something here, it's just I point this out to people in the States who are like, "Oh, the Democrats or the left, the boomers will use those terms interchangeably. They'll never turn on this group or on that group." And it's like, the party's called Labor, and when union people voted for Boris Johnson to be PM, they were just, racist, white nationalists, you're the devil. It's like they had no shame on turning against union people who were disobedient and didn't follow suit, so that without a hint of irony. So, what is most drives these people, and it's certainly the case with the conservatives as well, is power. It's not some kind of ideological, worldview necessarily.
Well, also the woke movement is a largely upper middle class movement. It's
Yes,
very, very privileged people. There's no coincidence that it tends to be more severe on the most privileged and wealthy university campuses. The people who've come from the more wealthy backgrounds, and there is an elite. And I know the words become a cliche again, but words become cliches for a reason. There's an elite within Westminster that has a complete disconnect with what the majority of people in the UK believe, and those people tend to be upper middle class. They tend to be from privileged backgrounds, and so they interpret dissatisfaction from the working classes as being a form of racism or bigotry or whatever it might be. Of course, a lot of this stems from 2016 in this country when we had the Brexit vote, and of course, working class people overwhelmingly voted to get out of the EU, and posh people who for whom the system had benefited them for many years voted to stay in, and they could only interpret a vote to leave this supranational trading bloc. They could only interpret it as being a sign that we hate foreigners, we don't want foreigners here. And of course, the Ashcroft polls in the aftermath of the Brexit vote, which give the most reliable indicator of why people voted to leave the EU, the number one reason was we want laws that govern this country to be made in this country. It's a matter of sovereignty. It's kind of a basic point, which is neither left or right. I mean, I can't imagine Americans being happy if over 50% of their regulations and
of
laws
course not.
had been formulated in Canada, say, not least because there would be terrible laws. But I
Mhm.
mean, so ever since then, and ever since the media class and the political class had a conniption at the idea that working class people might exercise their democratic right to choose an option that was not in their favor. And remember, by the way, the Brexit vote, the vote to remain in the EU was largely spearheaded by the Conservatives, by the Tories here, and definitely also by Labour. And then Labour ran on a manifesto to run the vote again, to say, look, you got it all wrong, you plebs. Let's do that again. And no wonder they lost. It was a landslide to the Tories as a result. But now it's gone the other way. It's gone back to Labour. But yeah, like you say, even if Starmer has got latent Marxist tendencies, or maybe not so latent, he is not the sort to implement radical measures if he feels it will make him unpopular. He's very much a centrist in terms of pragmatism, if not principle. I don't think we're veering widely to the left. He has spent a long time trying to strip out the Corbynite elements of the
Yeah.
party, including, of course, Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah,
Who
can
is
you break that down for us? 'Cause I this was shocking to people, so people don't realize this, so people don't understand, Jeremy Corbyn had been the previous leader of the Labour Party. He ran against, Theresa May. It became a hung parliament, which was a big shock, because he's really this kind of very old school, kind of, f college professor with a filthy tie, like, really, like, just a relic in many
Oh, I
ways.
mean, if only he got 2 E's at A level. He's not an academic.
No,
He's
but I
not
mean
not a bright guy.
that vibe of this kind of like smarmy,
Yeah, yeah.
holier than thou creature who's never had a real job in his life attitude, and yet feels comfortable prescribing, life for everybody else. Am I incorrect with that?
Well, he's one of those people who sees himself as a man of the working class, coming from a very posh background
Yes,
himself.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and it's that's sort of fine if you are someone like Tony Benn, if you're someone who has genuine working class principles that align with the working class needs, and you believe in which he did, and he very passionately pursued them. But Corbyn bought into the woke stuff very quickly. Corbyn was announcing his pronouns at an event. He appeared in Loughborough at an event, a speaking event, where he had white people were charged higher ticket prices. So he
Oh
very much
god.
bought into all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So he was very, and under his regime, the Labour Party became more middle class than it had ever been before. And I speak as someone who voted for him in 2017, someone who supported the party at that point, and I think I made a mistake. I think one of the things that when Corbyn came to power that was quite refreshing is he didn't appear to be filtering everything he said through a PR machine. He seemed to just say what he felt, and I thought that was very refreshing. And I also thought, if we're going to have a bipartisan two-party system in this country, let's have one that's left-wing and one that's right-wing, so people can have a choice. And at that time, both parties were pretty much identical. They've gone back to being pretty much identical. So I don't know where I stand. I'm certainly politically homeless. I wouldn't vote for either of those two parties. But yeah, nevertheless, so Corbyn, I suppose we could say, presided over a period in which overt expressions of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party became too common to ignore. It wasn't just a case of people expressing concerns about the policies of the Israeli government or the militaristic responses in some cases of the Israeli government. Of course, criticism of Israel is totally legitimate.
Of course.
Israelis do it all the time, right? So you can't immediately equate that with anti-Semitism. The problem was that too often, when it came to Labour ministers and members of the Labour Party, it crept over into the overtly anti-Semitic. I mean, Corbyn himself retweeted a mural that had been painted in London, which effectively depicted hook-nosed Jewish bankers around a table controlling the world. I mean, it was. I think Ice Cube tweeted out that same image at one point. So, and it's not really possible if you've got a modicum of intelligence to see that mural and not think that is drawing on anti-Semitic tropes. Now, I'm not saying maybe he did miss it. Maybe he is that stupid. It is possible. But it's certainly not something that the leader of the Labour Party or any politician ought to be doing. Anyway, Starmer's basically stripped out all the anti-Semitic elements within the party, Corbyn included. He hasn't said that Corbyn is anti-Semitic. He hasn't made that claim. Corbyn himself has not made open anti-Semitic declarations. Although that being said, a vast majority of British Jews do think he's anti-Semitic. Every poll tells us that. Probably because he was photographed laying a wreath on the grave of one of the killers for the at the Olympics. Do you remember
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Islamic
Wait,
fundamentalist
the
killers?
terrorists who captured the hostages?
Yes.
He
So
laid a wreath at their grave?
he claims he was just holding the wreath by the grave, um, which is a fine distinction, I would say. He also described Hamas as our friends in Hamas, and Hezbollah. But of course, he says he was being politically expedient. He said, if you're going to make any progress towards peace and you've got people in a room in a meeting, you describe them as our friends, right? But okay, so all of this, it doesn't look good, is what I'm saying.
Well, can
And
I just interject here for a second? Because
yeah,
Americans, again, everyone, especially in America, we tend to see politics, like as I said, in other countries, throw on vein. So when people hear, oh, he's a lefty, he's an anti-Semite, they think, okay, that the term anti-Semite is, as I say this as a Jewish person, is broadly overused in many cases. You can't criticize George Soros. This is just like really kind of, to me, a moral obscenity. The idea that George Soros is going to hide behind this term when people are died and being killed to some extent, even to this day. Uh, but when the left of America, even Bernie Sanders, who's probably the farthest left politician we have who's got anything going, is nothing compared to the left in the UK. We're talking like full blown Trotskyite Marxism, like class revolution stuff like this. So when you hear this, people need to appreciate that the red in the UK is so much redder than like Hillary Clinton, who's basically she would be a Tory in terms of her
oh,
votes over there.
100%. Oh, the Democrats are effectively like the Conservative Party. And
Yeah,
this is where it gets very confusing because if we start to think of this whole thing in terms of left versus right, we're going to get stuck pretty quickly. Um, I mean, Trump was a Democrat and then is now a Republican and
right.
doesn't have typical conservative values.
Not at all. Yeah,
Um, so it isn't. I think the reduction of everything to left and right is actually misleading. I think it's a hangover from the French Revolution, which we probably need to ditch. I think the culture wars killed it off anyway, because people who now proclaim themselves to be left wing are basically advancing the interests of the most privileged in society in the name of social justice. So
yeah.
I don't think you can at all understand it in this way. I should say, by the way, just to be clear about Corbyn, the reason why he was finally ejected from the party wasn't because of all the things I mentioned. It was actually because he said that accusations of anti-Semitism had been overblown and weaponized in order to attack him while he was leader of the party, and that was seen to be denying
Right.
the anti-Semitism. So it wasn't the case that he himself said anti-Semitic things and he was expelled from the party. That was what happened there. Diane Abbott lost the whip because she said that Jewish people didn't experience racism. So again, there's all these things that keep
Wait,
cropping up on that side of the
let me break
party.
in so people don't this is what I was getting at. People here can't wrap their heads around this. The most previous leader of the Labour Party has
Yeah.
been kicked out of the Labour Party. Like,
Yes.
that is something that Americans, since we only have 2 parties, can't, and we don't really have independents in Congress, can't wrap their heads around. It would be like,
Sure.
it's as if, Trump said, "Jeb, you're no longer a Republican," and the Republican Party's like, "Yeah, Jeb's no longer a Republican." And Jeb's sitting around like, "What did I do?" It's really kind of something that would never ever happen here.
Right. That's right. And Corbyn now runs on an independent ticket,
And won.
and he did just win in Islington. Yeah. So yeah, it is. I can see why from an outsider's perspective it seems very strange. I mean, we seem to veer wildly politically over here. I mean, we went from a Tory landslide to a Labour landslide, which maybe just goes to show. Well, it goes to show a couple of things. Firstly, that no one's vote can be taken for granted anymore.
Right.
One of the things that people have always assumed here is that there are left-wing voters and right-wing voters, and in truth, there should never be. There should just be voters who are open to persuasion by either party. And in America, of course, the Democrats have often taken the black vote for granted, for
Yes.
instance, and they are starting to see why that might not be a good idea. Where as more black voters turn to Trump, and of course, the Democrats don't get anywhere without the black vote.
Folks, Homes.com knows that when it comes to home shopping, it's never just about the house or condo. It's about the home. And what makes a home is more than just the house or property. It's the location and the neighborhood. If you have kids, it's also schools, nearby parks, transportation options. That's why Homes.com goes above and beyond to bring home shoppers the in-depth information they need to find the right home. And when I say in-depth, I'm talking deep. Each listing features comprehensive information about the neighborhood, complete with a video guide. They also have details about local schools with test scores, state rankings, and student to teacher ratio. They even have an agent directory with the sales history of each agent. So when it comes to finding a home, not just a house, this is everything you need to know all in one place. Homes.com. We've done your homework. It's warm, it's sunny, it's time to fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Here's the thing: Factor's meals are fresh and never frozen. They're dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. No matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. So make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? They've got 35 meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll have new flavors to explore. You can hit those wellness goals this summer with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. From breakfast to dessert, you can stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon, and you can keep that kitchen time to a minimum because Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, no prepping, no cooking, no cleaning up. Head to factormeals.com/yourwelcome50 and use code yourwelcome50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code YOUR yourwelcome50 at factormeals.com/yourwelcome50 to get half off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Let's get back to the show. Did you see the Forbes editorial that got pulled almost immediately in the wake of Trump's? It was like a Titania article, in the wake of Trump's, assassination attempt?
No, what was the article?
I get to tell you about it. I'm so excited. I wanna pull up this exact headline to read it verbatim because I saw it. A fan of mine tweeted at me. I thought it was a joke. Then I Googled it and
Oh,
I
I have
will
seen it.
yeah,
I have seen it.
Forbes
Yeah,
Forbes editorial. Will surviving gunfire be Donald Trump's next appeal to black voters?
I wish
And
I'd
it's
have thought of that.
by Dr. Sean Harper, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert.
Yeah, I wish I'd have thought of that. It's brilliant. I mean, but he's not joking, of course. And this is
No.
this. Yeah, that's the problem. But I mean, DEI. I don't know what you think about it, but I think it's very much on its last legs. I mean, particularly with Vance as VP. I think who.
I am very glad you bring this up because I think people who are on the center right don't know how to take a win because it's not gonna be celebrated by the media, they're just gonna stop talking about it, and for example, I know the trans issue is nowhere near as big in the UK as it is here in the States, especially with kids, and they've really like Pride last year, it was Pride is June, I believe, right? Rainbow flags everywhere. This year, the corporations, it's much more muted. It's not gone away, but it's certainly receded. And this was a result of conservatives being like, wait a minute, like this is all with kids stuff. Like let's tone it down. If this wants to be for adults, being adult stuff, go ahead. But it was so pervasive at a certain point. It was like, guys, this is kind of really over the top.
Yeah, it's not quite there yet. I mean, the Pride Parade in Arlington, Texas this year had dildos on display,
Yeah.
people in fetish gear, half naked drag queens, and the whole thing was co-sponsored by Lockheed Martin. So you're not quite there yet.
No, but the
You,
but point is it's not it's receding. So to your
yeah,
point about, some of these other issues, w and people I would I will be delighted to gloat to you or brag to you, it's not the term gloat, brag, that I was the guy who got Roseanne Barr back on Twitter. So I
right.
think whenever you have, any of these little things taken away and go in the other direction, that's something people need to be cognizant of because you can't here's another one, who's that Bud Light character?
Dylan Mulvaney.
Dylan Mulvaney is on a milk cart now. You can't
Yeah.
find her. Like this person got vanished. So these sorts of things they peak and then they recede quite strongly.
Well, yeah, but then Dylan Mulvaney did make the mistake of releasing a terrible single,
No,
a really bad song, and I
no, you're
think
kidding, right?
you saw the song, right?
No, I thought you're not trolling me.
No, no, no. There's a music video. It's called Days of Girlhood, and it's about him being a girl and how that means going shopping, sitting around with friends, bitching about other people, drinking champagne in a jacuzzi. That's what being a woman is, according to Dylan Mulvaney. Except, of course, Michael. Surely we shouldn't completely neglect the possibility that he's trolling the world because no comedian could get away with being that overtly misogynistic
Yeah,
unless there was a level of irony
yeah.
to it.
Hey, Andrew. You're kind of a little fraud here. Like Dylan's just Titania who's putting the work.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I know, I should have gone the whole hog. Although
Right?
Dylan hasn't put in all the work because he still retained his genitals, didn't he? But,
Yeah, but that's
but he
but you know what? Doesn't mean anything. As Keir Starmer learned, that's still a woman.
well, the vast majority of people who identify as the opposite sex now don't have
Yeah,
their genitals removed, they keep them. They get the best of both worlds, I guess. Yeah, Dylan Mulvaney, I mean, that it's the idea that a guy can go online and say, "Look, girls, basically, you're women because you trip over in a ditzy way if an insect approaches you, and you scream a lot, and you flap your hands around, and you wear too much makeup, and you mince about the place, and you can't be taken seriously. You can't hold down a job. You can't have a serious conversation. You're only interested in what's in the pages of Cosmopolitan. This that idea that someone could do that and not be roundly condemned as the most anti-woman, misogynistic,
right.
rather than being embraced, rather than having Drew Barrymore get on her knees, prostrate herself before this individual. I mean, it's funny. The whole thing's hilarious. And I think he's done a very good job of trolling. I do. I think it's a troll.
But also, if you're that archetype, you're not drinking Bud Light. You're
No, no, of
drinking
course not.
Cosmos or Barbie beer or whatever it is. You're not drinking Bud Light.
No, no, that's right. Maybe, as you say, the corporation element is interesting because how much did they lose on that Bud Light campaign? It was
Oh, it
significant.
was a ton. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a ton.
And ultimately, money does speak, doesn't it? And I think, well, we know that from the corporations who have for years now been emblazoning their social media profiles with the Progress Pride colors, with the exception of their outlets in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, etc. Now, we all know about that. That shouldn't be enough to dispel any doubts that this is cynical. Because if any of these companies had been flying that flag back when being gay was illegal, when there wasn't equal marriage, when there wasn't equal age of consent, when gay people didn't have equal rights, then I would be like, fair enough. They didn't at all. None of them did. Remember in Scotland it was illegal till 1981, quite late. Now, no one was flying that flag then. It's only after it became safe and it's only after it became fashionable that they started flying it. And now they're flying the Progress Pride flag, which isn't even a gay rights flag, it's an anti-gay rights flag. Um, and so now they get an even greater luxury. They get to bask in this, sort of promote this fundamentally anti-gay movement, a movement that wants to see homosexuality eradicated,
Right.
and yet they can say they're all about gay rights. That, I mean, again, the whole thing is beyond satire, right?
And there's also this shameless revisionism because it's not like Stonewall happened under a conservative governor and a conservative mayor, right? And Bill Clinton was the one who signed into law the ban on gay marriage. Hillary Clinton and
Yeah.
Barack Obama both campaigned against gay marriage at a time when I think everyone listening to this
Well,
knows they personally believed in it. So they had no problem, instead of having the courage of their convictions, so to speak, to just throw whoever they needed to under the bus to get further ahead. So
sure. I mean,
uh,
gay marriage is a very conservative policy. In fact, it was in the UK. It was pushed through by the Conservative government. I mean, it's the idea that gay people should be normalized, that they should
right.
have the framework of the family that has been established in tradition for centuries, the idea of marriage, uh, and and that's why lots of gay rights groups opposed gay marriage.
Yes,
They didn't want anything to do with it. So
and they regard it as heteronormative.
yeah, heteronormative, exactly. So of course, it doesn't surprise me that the conservatives were the ones to bring gay marriage in. But
Are
for
you
me, go on. Sorry.
Are you a fan of, like, one of my favorite people, Fran Lebowitz?
I not familiar.
Okay, so she's this old lesbian, she's just been this smart ass New Yorker since the '70s, and, she goes around and gives these talks, and someone asked her what she thought about gays in the military and gay marriage. She goes, "Are you kidding me?" She goes, "People used to pretend to be gay to get out of getting into the military." She's like, "A fight for freedom should be a fight for freedom. This looks like a fight for slavery. These are the 2 most confining institutions, and this is what we're fighting for? Like, I don't get it."
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, for me, it's a kind of no-brainer insofar as if the state is going to offer a union
Right.
between two of its citizens and all the benefits that come with that, then it has to offer them to everyone. So that's to me, it's a no-brainer. I think that doesn't compel religious bodies, religious institutions to have gay marriage, right? For them, marriage is heterosexual exclusively. That's their right. So, there's no conflict here. There's no issue here. And it just seems strange to me that support for gay marriage is plummeting in the US off the back of all of these, TQ plus activists who are
Yes.
twerking in front of kids, who are, you know, um, trying to erode the sex binary, trying to indoctrinate children with queer theory, and because of that, support for gays is going
Yes.
down, even though that movement is explicitly anti-gay. It's like, so we can't win. We get homophobia from the Christian right, who hate us for who we are. Then we get it from the far left, and that's interpreted as our allies. Like, that's weird. These are the people who want to destroy us.
There's something I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on, and that just something that would hit very close to home for you, and that is Scotland's new kind of hate speech laws, which aren't just being done, frivolously. Apparently, like the prosecutions have begun pretty vigorously. Can you explain that to people? And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the whole subject.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in America won't believe that this
Right.
can happen, right? So it's worth going through. So firstly, Humza Yousaf was Justice Minister for the SNP, the Scottish National Party, which has been effectively the predominating party in Scotland for a long, long time. Not since this general election, because it lost a lot, and we could talk about that. But the SNP Justice Minister Humza Yousaf decided to implement this new set of laws. It was effectively a new blasphemy law, which would come in through the back door, even though it was actually superseding an existing blasphemy law. But what it did was just implement a whole new set of things that you can blaspheme about. And what he said was, he wanted the right to criminalize any speech that was likely to stir up hatred. That's the formulation used in the bill. To likely to stir up hatred. This includes anything you say in the privacy of your own home that is likely to stir up
I
hatred.
did
It
not know
includes,
that. I thought, oh, holy crap! I did not know that.
yeah, that was explicitly put into the
Holy
legislation.
crap!
Or anything that there's a whole subsection of the bill which was to do with the public performance of a play. And he was asked in Holyrood about this. Is it likely that neo Nazis are going to put on a play to try and radicalize people? And he said, yeah, they could, they might. Which just goes to show he doesn't know any neo Nazis. Neither do I, but I know they're not into amateur dramatics. And so he put all of this through, and a lot of it is to do with gender critical feminism, criticism of Islam, all of these kind of things that are very, legitimate points of view, which can suddenly become criminalized under this bill. The other key point, as with all hate speech legislation across Europe, is that the evidential threshold is basically zero.
Right.
All that it takes is for someone to phone up and the police and say, "I perceive that this slight or whatever occurred because of my protected characteristic," and that is sufficient for it to be recorded as a hate crime. No evidence is required other than perception of the victim. The word victim, by the way, we used to say complainant, and that, if you're interested, is a legacy of Keir Starmer's time as Director of Public Prosecutions for the Crown Prosecution Service. He was the one who had the language changed so that we describe those who claim to have been sexually assaulted as being victims immediately, thereby bypassing due process, bypassing the whole, presuming guilt. Anyway, so that's that. So on April the 1st of this year, as though they're trolling us, April the 1st, April Fool's Day, the new hate speech bill came into power in Scotland. The police had already, in an front cover article of the Herald newspaper, it was revealed that police had been undergoing training on how to deal with jokes, comedians, if they said something that was offensive, how that would come into how that could potentially be prosecutable. So this was all kicking off on April the 1st. I run a comedy night in London called Comedy Unleashed, which is all about pushing back against orthodoxy, platforming comedians who get cancelled or who just can't do their material on the mainstream circuit because of the current ideological constrictions. So we, Comedy Unleashed, went up to Scotland, to Edinburgh. We put on a show on April the 1st in Scotland's capital, to try and to tell some offensive jokes and to sort of say to the police, "Okay, go on then. If you're going to do it, let's see what happens." We even had an act dressed up as the Scottish police's mascot, which was, they called it the Hate Monster. Did you see this?
Oh,
Um,
okay, the thing is with having Titania on the show, like,
yeah,
I can't
you think
tell
I'm.
any
Yeah, you
it
think half of what I say is untrue. I'm going to make a
I
guarantee to you, Mark.
want I want to think that half of what you say is untrue. I'd
Every
rather that you're making this up because
yeah,
it's so Orwellian and dark. One of the key elements of the Western law
yeah,
is that ostensibly, is that it's objective. It's that it's not that whoever
yeah,
reads it can just pull anything out of their ass. It's that, okay, here's the 3 elements that define, an assault. Does this have this one, this one, this one? If it fits those, it's an assault. If not, out you go. So to have something which can be adjudicated as a crime after the fact based on someone somewhere hearing it and having their feelings hurt, Alexander Hamilton had said that retroactive law is the mark of tyranny. So this sort of thing where there's no objectivity, and if I'm a juror, right, and there's 12 of us, and there's a case, I should very easily not have to have my feelings matter, but look at the evidence and be like, all right, is this a thing? To say that something could possibly cause hatred, by definition, anything we say can cause someone to get upset somewhere, even if they just don't agree with their politics, or they find us boring, or maybe they find the way we talk offensive. It's just absolutely beyond outrageous, and especially a country as liberal, excuse me, a region as liberal as Scotland is just beyond.
Well, it's not liberal. I mean, it's the opposite
I
of
mean,
liberal.
ostensibly, I mean, it's the birth of
Ostensibly,
liberalism. Hume, Smith, I mean, what the
exactly.
Scots
Although,
gave.
of course, they renamed the Hume Tower at Edinburgh University because of a problematic footnote in one of his
No,
books.
you're joking, right?
No, it's a footnote about race, and of course, he's of that era where the views don't align with 21st century intersectionalists, and so you know, well, look, there's a lot to cover here. I mean, what you've got to understand about the UK generally is we have a police force that is captured by this ideology. We have a
Right.
body called the College of Policing that trains police and just decided in around 2015 to implement these things called non-crime hate incidents, which would mean that if someone phones up and says, I've said something that's upset them, it's not a crime, but they've upset me because of my protected characteristic. That gets recorded against my name without my knowledge as a non-crime hate incident. There's been estimates are around 250,000 of these have been recorded since this policy began in England and Wales alone. So that's under 10 years. And you know, what it means for us as well is that if, for instance, I have a non-crime hate incident against my name and I apply for a job like teaching or something where there's some kind of disclosure check that has to be undertaken, it would show up on that check and I probably wouldn't get that job. So there are actual consequences to this. In Scotland, the Scottish police have a database of offensive jokes that people have told online. Again, they don't let the people know that they're recording their names against this thing. As you probably know about the Marcus Meekin case, where we had a YouTuber, Count Dankula, who did a joke video and now has a criminal record, was found guilty in a court of law in Scotland for a video in which he taught his girlfriend's pug dog to do a Nazi salute. Now, this is real. This is like the jokes are being criminalized. There's a man called, I think it was Matthew Woods in the UK, a teenager, stupid teenager, posted a sick joke on his website, on Facebook, I think it was. And it was a joke about Madeleine McCann, the girl who was kidnapped. And he served prison time for that. So that's the context. I think under the protection of the First Amendment in America, these kind of things are absolutely unfathomable. And I don't think it is the case that the UK is more susceptible to woke ideology. I just think that we don't have that buffer. We don't have that protective guarantee of a First Amendment. We, in fact, have hate speech laws encoded into two major laws. We have the 2003 Communications Act, and we also have the Public Order Act, which I think is 1986. And hate speech is encoded into those two things, which means that if you say something, quote unquote, grossly offensive online, you can be prosecuted for it. You could even go to prison for it.
Hey, folks, Michael Malice here, tolerated author, Twitter asshole, and sheath underwear model. I love wearing sheath. I wear it every single day. They're the most comfortable briefs you'll ever wear. Every time you hear my voice, you should know I'm wearing sheath. And what makes sheath different is that they have dual pouch technology. They have one pouch for one part of your male anatomy, another pouch for another part of your male anatomy. Sounds weird, but when you put them on, they're going to be super comfortable. They keep you cool in the hot weather, keep you nice and snug in an interview, on a date, doing a podcast, so on and so forth. After you tried sheath, you're never going back to the other brands. Support the underwear that supports you. Go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice. You get 20% off. That's sheathunderwear.com, promo code MALICE, 20% off. They've got shirts, they've got hoodies, they've got mesh ones. They have something for you. They also have a girls line, but since women aren't allowed to listen to the show, I can't help you. sheathunderwear.com, promo code Malice. Hey guys, it's hot outside. Your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep. And if you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA, and they use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at that perfect temperature all night long. And they're very comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping in bacteria because it can clog your pores. It causes breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/malice to try the sheets today. Whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use promo code Malice at checkout, you get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. They're so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you aren't 100% satisfied, full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/malice and use code Malice to get your free 3-piece towel set. Save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/malice to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to the show. To go back to where we left off, I'm looking up this hate monster thing. Oh my God, you're not joking.
What I would urge you to do is watch the advert that the Scottish police put out, where the hate monster, it's a fluffy Sesame Street style orange thing with beady eyes, and it emerges in the screen, and it's got a broad Glaswegian accent, and it talks about how it can feel the hate building within him. And he's like, we've all got a hate monster inside of us, but we've got to keep it under control, otherwise the police will come and get you. You have to watch that video.
We'll have the link in the show notes, and the slogan is "Be good to yourself, don't feed the hate monster." And it kind of looks like the tip of a genital, to be honest, like a condom head.
Well, although if your genitals are that color, you might want to see a
Well, I
doctor
think
about
it's
that.
also interesting that they had to they made him orange, like, like, okay, what like, there were meetings of what color can we make him, and we don't wanna make him green
Yeah.
because then he's Irish, or you don't wanna
Yeah.
make him blue because then he's a Tory maybe, so he's or like, they had to kinda settle on orange,
Well,
which
that's
I
a
guess
bad choice in Scotland as well, because of course orange is the colour of Protestantism.
oh,
So
okay, yeah.
there's a slightly potential sectarian element to that. Anyway, but the thing about that monster is it's so infantile and so
Wait,
ridiculous. And of course,
I'm sorry, let me read you from this is from the Scottish police website. I have to read this to people. This is far beyond a parody of anything you've written, Mr. Tanya. Have you met the hate mon this is from the cops. Have you met the hate monster? The hate monster represents that feeling some people get when they are frustrated and angry and take it out on others because they feel like they need to show they are better than them. In other words, they commit a hate crime. To me, a hate crime is when you're targeting someone who's ostensibly persecuted. It's not just being mean. There is an element of like, all right, this group has had it rough for a long time, so let's be a little sensitive. Otherwise, because we got away with treating them like shit. Like ostensibly, that's the reasoning. When you're feeling insecure or angry, the hate monster feeds on that. The hate monster loves it when you get angry. He weighs you down until you end up targeting someone just because they looked or act different to you. Well, yeah, I think targeting people who act differently than me, there's lots of things I would never do, and when people do them, I hate them. Yeah.
yeah.
Harming
Well, I mean,
children?
it's very interesting, isn't it? The language, the cadence
Yes.
of that. It's very obviously patronizing. It says a lot about the SNP, actually. It says a lot about the paternalistic view of the people. They think that everyone is like a child. So in order to stop hate crime, you have to dress up in a big fluffy orange outfit. You have to have a monster to tell you to stop it. Remember the SNP is a very deeply authoritarian party. It has authoritarianism baked into its DNA. The SNP on little things like it was changing the minimum pricing for alcohol so that because it thinks too many poor people get drunk. It was banning 2-for-1 pizzas because it thinks too many poor people get fat. It implemented a thing called the named person scheme. The idea of the Scottish government was that every child born in Scotland would have a state guardian because they don't trust the parents to raise the kids. Now that got overruled by a higher court, but the point is that the SNP does have this paternalistic idea. They force through this crazy gender policy, gender self ID. They wanted to make it so that you could basically say you were a woman if you were a man, and within 3 months, without any medical consultation or any serious degree of medical consultation, you could then access women's spaces. And they did all of this in spite of the overwhelming uh, opposition from the Scottish people, as every poll showed. And this ultimately, I have to say, I think it's a combination of the hate speech bill, which is wildly unpopular. And of course, on the first day, April the 1st, because this was open to any complaints and the complainant was always taken seriously, most of the complaints, there was a significant number against J.K. Rowling because a lot of trans activists were exploiting the system, weaponizing the system, as we knew they would. But the most complaints were against Humza Yousaf, who was then First Minister, because Humza Yousaf had stood up in Parliament and gone on a rant against white people. And it's really unpleasant if you watch the clip. He's talking about how all of the major positions in Scotland, all the judges, all the CEOs, white, all this, white. And he was spitting out the word white with such venom that it sounded like racial hatred. Um, and of course, Scotland is a country which is 97% white. So the idea that, of course, white people are going to predominate, it's just a matter of arithmetic. Anyway, he so he got the most complaints, and then I think the SNP started realizing, because the system got clogged up and the police couldn't cope. I imagine now they've moved beyond that and they're dealing with it and they're starting to implement this. They they are, as I say, I'm glad now that the SNP has been decimated. But the reason it was decimated was partly the unpopularity of the hate speech bill and partly their mad gender bill. It wasn't even that. It was the fact that a double rapist called Adam Graham
Yeah.
decided after he was convicted to identify as Isla Bryson and put on a dodgy blonde wig and wear pink leggings, because of course that makes you a woman. Uh, they accommodated him in a women's prison while they were running a risk assessment about whether he should stay in that women's prison. And of course, he's a double rapist. What risk assessment do you need? Don't
Right.
put a rapist in with women, right? I mean that's it. And they stuck by it. The SNP stuck by it. Nicola Sturgeon, they claim this is what brought her down. I think they could not see that a rapist claiming to be a woman was not automatically a woman, and yet things are on this score. Things are a lot worse in the US. There are a lot of rapists in women's prisons in the US, as far as I'm aware. You can
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong about that.
no, no, and I actually I cut out the didn't say the last part of the hate monster where it goes, "Why do some people let the hate monster in? We 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 know that young men aged 18 to 30 are most likely to commit hate crime, particularly those from socially excluded communities who are heavily influenced by their peers. They may have deep rooted feelings of being socially and economically disadvantaged, combined with ideas about white male entitlement." Yeah, when you're 18 to 29, you're
Yeah,
poor. You are
yeah.
going to be economically disadvantaged. Oh, no matter who you are, you're
Well,
broke.
no,
It's a
that's it.
thing.
They're basically saying poor white men,
Yeah.
right? Again, the class snobbery is apparent. The anti-white idea is apparent, and certainly the
Explicit.
anti-male
It's not
idea.
it's explicit. It's not apparent. It's explicit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So they did. I think they deleted that bit. I know they took down the hate monster video, which is a shame because it's still online though.
Yes, it
Someone
is.
else has got it. It's
It's on
still there,
YouTube.
right?
Yes.
So have a look at that. Just unbelievable. But it just shows how far this has spread. And now in Ireland, the Irish government is trying to pass a hate speech bill even more draconian than the Scottish bill, which can even prosecute you if you have things on your phone or your devices that could stir up hatred. They can seize your smartphone. If you had an offensive meme, that could be liable for prosecution. Up to 7 years in prison for offensive statements, they're saying. The Irish government is completely lost. I was in the Doyle recently. The Doyle is the Irish Parliament about 4 weeks ago now. I was there for a free speech summit, and in the dial there is a door which has been the Progress Pride flag has been etched onto this glass door permanently. So there, the Parliament, which is meant to represent all views, is taking a very firm stance on this very predominant cultural issue. The flag is everywhere in Dublin. Like I mean, albeit I was there in June, but it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was like a militaristic, paramilitary takeover.
It was. It is. Yes.
Like it was everywhere. The flag on the side of the airport alone was just insanely big. And I know you shouldn't draw comparisons with Nazis and stuff, but the militaristic, regimental, the way the flags are flown in Regent Street. If you Google Pride flags, Regent Street, London, Andrew Sullivan was right to point out it looked like it'd been designed by Albert Speer. It was all down the whole. It's like it's whacking you on the head with this ideology, saying you must conform. It, I think it's really scary stuff, particularly if you're gay or if you're a woman, and the people who are flying this flag want to see your rights eroded.
Yeah.
That's really unpleasant.
Well, so what happened when you had that comedy night?
Oh yeah, well we had the hate monster. I wrote a script with my friend, and he dressed up as the hate monster in a big puppet outfit, and jumped on the stage and basically said the most hateful things because he's the hate monster. And we just thought it'd be quite interesting if the police came and arrested their own hate monster. But of course, it didn't happen, which is, I suppose, a shame. But I didn't. I mean, it sounds stupid, but so many of us were going up there, and people were worried, and we were talking about, oh, well, should we lock our phones or not take the phones to the event because we don't want our phones seized, or and around the same time, a bunch of gender critical feminists were going up to say that trans women are not women in public, which would classify as a hate crime now. And they were saying, don't have face recognition on your phone because then the police can hold it in front of you and open your phone. Change your setting. Why are we being encouraged to behave like criminals? When we're just sort of promoting liberty is insane. But yeah, the event was brilliant. But the problem was, again, we had the event cancelled. 3 days before it was on. We had a venue. It was all booked. Then they did a bit of Googling and they found out that I guess they found out that I'm for free speech. And they panicked and they cancelled. So we had to find a last minute venue, and the last minute venue was a football club. So it was a more working class club anyway, and worked out better. But even that venue's now pulled on us. We were going to do a gig during the Edinburgh Fringe next month, and they've pulled on us. And I don't know if you know what happened to us last year in August. So the Edinburgh Festival Fringe runs every year, largest arts festival in the
Yeah,
world. And of course, all of this stuff is going to have an impact on the arts most
of
overtly.
course.
So last year, Comedy Unleashed, my comedy group, took a one-off show to the Edinburgh Fringe, and we had a venue. It was all booked. It was all ready to go. It was advertised. And the day before the event, the venue found out that one of our acts they considered to be offensive and problematic. This is a man called Graham Linehan, one of the best comedy writers who has ever existed, in my view. And he was performing as part of the. He's been cancelled, completely cancelled, because he doesn't think kids should be mutilated on the NHS, right? And he doesn't think, and he thinks women have a right to rape crisis centres, etc. So uncontroversial stuff if you go back 15 years. Anyway, he was performing, they cancelled it. They put out a statement saying, we won't allow this person's opinions to violate our space. It was the most histrionic response. We got another venue last minute. Then they cancelled on us on the day, 2 hours before it was meant to go on. In the end, the show had to go on a makeshift platform, no bigger than 1 metre squared, in front of the Scottish Parliament. We did it outside. In front of the Scottish Parliament, these offensive comedians stood up, told their jokes, and by then it had become a media story. So there were TV cameras, BBC, everything was there. So it wasn't really a gig anymore. It was a protest at that point. And that's sort of a shame because we wanted it, ultimately we wanted to put on funny gigs. But the fact that one of the UK's leading comedy figures, Graham Linehan, and a comedy club like ours, Comedy Unleashed, can't get a venue at the leading the biggest arts festival in the world because we stand up for the rights of women, children, gay people, and free speech. That is a dreadful situation. And I think above all, with all this culture war stuff and all the very high stakes stuff that's going on, I think what we often forget is that the arts have been decimated by this movement. It has
Yes.
been an absolute unmitigated disaster for the arts. No art of any worth can be created under these extreme ideological positions and situations. It can't be done. It hasn't been done. Nobody will be able to name one work of art worth any salt under the woke movement. It doesn't exist. It cannot exist.
Folks, I want to talk to you about Trade Coffee. They're a specialty coffee marketplace that matches customers with the best coffees from local roasters across the country. You take a short quiz to share your preferences, and Trade matches you to personalized recommendations. It's a convenient way to experience small batch specialty coffees and support small businesses. The coffee is roasted to order and ships to you within 48 hours. What a great idea. From hot or iced, dark roast or decaf, espressos or cold brew, Trade has it all. And they have a new cold coffee subscription, which offers a rotating variety of the best iced and cold brew coffees to make at home, which are curated by their team of coffee experts. It's a great option to cool off this summer and stay caffeinated all year long. They sent me their apparatus, and that's how I learned that you don't have to first boil the water to make cold brew. You'd think I'd know that because it has the word in the name, but here we are. So I learned something from Trade. So thank you, Trade. So it's convenient, it's personalized, and it's really fun to try new things every single time. So give Trade a try this summer. Right now, they're offering 30% off your first order when you visit drinktrade.com/welcome and subscribe. You could sign up for any of their subscriptions at 30% off. You'll save on your coffee this summer, and they guarantee you'll love your first coffee or they'll replace it for free. That's drinktrade.com/welcome for 30% off your subscription order. Drinktrade.com/welcome. I got to tell you guys, this would be a great present for a friend of yours who is a coffee drinker because every month or so they will get a new batch and they'll think of you and they'll say, wow, my friend's really cool. And then you'll say, you're welcome. Let's get back to the show. My all-time great hero, Camille Paglia, she's a college professor, teaches at the Philadelphia School of the Arts, and she was going on, when you're throwing out the Western canon, which because it's created by white males and you have nothing to replace it with, this is thousands of years of cultural heritage that
Yeah.
belongs, I'm using that term very loosely, to all of us. There's so much gold in there. And now you're having people being raised with no awareness of this. She's like, this is just a complete abomination and just one of the greatest outrages of all history. And she's
Yeah.
completely correct. If people ask me this is a fun party question, like what do you think is the worst day in history? It would be the burning of the Library of Alexandria, where they had this library which had all the books on earth, and they sacked it and burned it down. And to have that one loss of all that knowledge just permanently destroyed is just something that's literally
I,
irrevocable and horrific.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we know that Caesar burned the library by accident. They say, but the sacking you're talking about is later. It's about 40 years after the foundation of Islam. and the man responsible for the sacking, his name's Omar, the general. That we actually have on record his statement. He
Oh,
ordered the burning of the Library of Alexandria, saying, if those books contain falsehoods, then they should be burned. If those books contain truths, well, all those truths are in the Quran anyway, so they should be burned. That was what he said. And that's what extreme ideology does when it comes to the arts. And by the way, the complete works of Aeschylus was in that library. It was the only copy. We now have 7 of his plays. We should have 90. One of the most important dramatists who has ever lived, and we lost all of that because of the philistinism of that guy. And I know we talk about Islam had a golden age for the arts. Well, that was only 40 years after Muhammad. I'm not so sure. Because that straight away, I think any religious ideology, when it goes to an extreme, or any ideology that says you don't need anything but our
yes.
holy book, that is going to the arts cannot be sustained in that situation. I find the whole thing really scary. I think Palia has had this right for a long time. A few weeks ago here, university at SOAS, which is a London university, used to be called the School of African or Oriental and African Studies. They just call themselves SOAS now, maybe because Oriental is considered an
Yes.
offensive word. I don't know. I'm not sure why. It's just the opposite of Occidental, but anyway. So they have decided. Well, the philosophy department put out a statement saying we need to decolonize not just their own curriculum. We need to decolonize philosophy as a discipline of dead white males such as Socrates and Plato, Aristotle. That's what they said. That's a leading university. It's not trivial. That's a leading university
But
that can
but
only
you know what
see.
else? These were Greeks. These were people of color. If you have you has anyone seen a Greek person? They're not exactly Aryan ideals. They're dark skinned.
I don't think that has crossed their mind. I think what they've done
Right.
is they've seen those plaster casts.
Right, right.
Like at the
They're alabaster. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, which weren't, by the way, white in the
No,
ancient
they're
world.
painted.
Right?
Yes.
But really fun. There's a funny story in Cambridge University, the university there. I think it's it could be at the Fitzwilliam. Anyway, the university, the archaeological section. There's a whole section at the university, the University Museum, which has plaster casts from the ancient world, various deities, Roman and Greek, and major thinkers and major figures. And they put a little sign on it on the back of pressure from the classics department at Cambridge University. They put a sign up saying, by the way, all of these plaster casts are white, but we don't want to in any way imply that the ancient world was ethnically homogenous. And any visitor going to that knows that the plaster casts are white because plaster is white. We
And
know that.
and
We don't need a
and
sign.
and white people aren't white. We're not white in the sense of a
Right.
plaster statue. It's not the same
It's
color.
no, it's all so absurd, and to hear that coming from the classics department, there are people at one of the world's top universities. There are people within classics who want the discipline of classics to be gone. They think it's because they only see the world through group identity. They can only look at the Mona Lisa and say that is, bits of oil on bits of wood, daubed by a powerful white man in the service of other powerful white men. That's all they can see. And
Yes.
so they don't see the beauty, the numinousness, the transcendental quality of the art. They can't see the art. Any kind of ideological extreme renders art useless because art just becomes a mechanism by which the message can be promoted. And you see that in all regimes. We saw it under Stalin. Again and again, like art is just decimated and it becomes a propagandistic exercise.
I did a book on North Korea, and they say this explicitly there. They say Kim Jong Il said, the dear leader, that unless art can be understood by the masses, it's not. And they specifically go after the Mona Lisa. It cannot be considered a masterpiece if it's ambiguous. The message has to be clear and propagandistic for everybody for it to be considered art.
That's astonishing. I apologize. I haven't read your book. I must do. But because I think that I would like to use that quotation in future because that to me says it all.
Yes, and to see it, it was shocking to me to read it when they were like
Yeah.
him going after the Mona Lisa of all things. You know what I
Oh
mean? It
well.
was
But yeah. But now, I mean, recently, obviously close to my heart is Shakespeare because that's
yeah.
my doctoral dissertation was in Shakespeare. I used to teach the Shakespeare course at Oxford University to the undergraduates. It's important to me that the greatest writer in the English language is preserved, and not problematized. And yet we have Sheffield University put out a video saying that the only reason we study Shakespeare is because he's a dead white man. The people who run the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Globe Theatre are completely captured, and they keep running anti-racist Shakespeare workshops, and they keep putting on dreadful productions that are reduced to propaganda. It's just agitprop. It's just how can we turn this masterpiece into an exercise in promoting our mania for group identity, uh, and of course you miss everything about the play. If you just read Othello and all you can see is that the key figure is black, and how does that affect the? I mean, it's significant in the play. It's mentioned in the play, but it's not all that the play is. Shakespeare isn't simplistic like that. He doesn't think in those terms.
So
Um, Go on,
sorry.
sorry.
No, I want you to finish your train of thought here.
Well, no, I think I've probably come to a natural conclusion. Just to say that in 1642, the Puritans shut the theatres in London. They seized control in Parliament. The first thing they did was shut down the theatres, uh, and they're trying to do it again. It's a different set of Puritans, but they're trying to do. This is why I called my last book "The New Puritans," not because I'm slagging off the old Puritans, although I would say the ones who shut down the theatres deserve our ire. But they're at it again, and they're going after the greats. They will go after the likes of Shakespeare and Dante and Cervantes and Plato and all of it. They'll go after the geniuses. They have to, because all of the best of Western civilization is from their perspective, simply the perpetuation of power structures.
But that's also how you conquer any people. You knock their gods off the altars and put up your own. So this
Right.
is a very smart long-term plan. If you want to seize power and maintain power, you got to swing for the kings and topple their temples.
Yeah, yeah, but it's insanity to me that the very people who are sort of entrusted to preserve this stuff, the custodians of literature, philosophy, and history and art, are the very ones who are attempting to destroy it.
Oh
But
yeah,
I suppose, that's the impact of the long march through the institutions.
this is
It's something
Gramsci. I was just going to say Gramsci. Exactly. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
you brought up yourself. So Andrew, this leads me to the very organic question, and I'm not saying this as someone who isn't putting his money where his mouth is. I lived in New York my entire life. I did not want to move here to Austin. My friend Lauren Chen once said, "Why am I funding my own oppression?" The trigonometry guys, I'm assuming you guys are at least acquaintances
yeah. We're
with
friends.
one
Yeah,
another. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure I'm not telling tales out of school. They're taking steps or thinking about it, moving here to Austin. At a certain point, Atlas has to shrug. So, how committed are you to staying there, or do you think things are going to get in a better direction? Like, where are you personally?
Um. Oh, I go back and forth on this. I'm sometimes I'm very optimistic and sometimes very pessimistic. What I don't want to happen is for the world to become more divided, and for us to sort of have our own
Sure.
enclaves, physical enclaves.
Sure.
Which is, of course, the upshot of this kind of stuff. But if we live in in a society dominated by those who wish to utterly obliterate everything that we have built up over centuries, then that's not sustainable either. And I'm a creative person. I want to be able to continue to work in the arts. I mean, at the moment, I can't. If I write a play or a stage show, to get it on is a big feat. It's almost impossible, actually, because every major theatre and every major production company has been captured by this ideology, and they will look
Right.
at the fact they will look at my writings, the things that I've done, and they will say, "You are one of you're a persona non grata. You are a heretic, and we cannot promote the views of a heretic." So and what we need is patrons. What we need is very rich people who understand the primacy of the arts in this culture war. The problem we have is actually most of the people who become rich, and do want to help in this area don't understand the importance of the arts. They don't get it because they're largely entrepreneurs who don't have that artistic mindset, and they don't see how much this permeates all of culture. So actually, the arts is the hardest fight, in the culture war, because it's the art conservatives, those on the right, have often dismissed the arts as being a
Yes,
waste of
entirely.
time,
Yeah.
as being a luxury. They don't see what happens when a society is deprived of this. Okay, there was a reason why, you know, when I was a kid, I used to go over to Florence, well, kid in my early 20s, and go over to Florence quite a lot because I have family there. You could go out at midnight and there were no muggings. No one was going to attack you. You can walk down the streets. Why? Because there's great art everywhere on the streets. There are the statue of David in the Piazza della Signoria, the statue of Perseus by Cellini just directly opposite. This stuff out there in the open. It's just there everywhere you turn. It does something to a culture. It creates something valuable. And when you live in an area where it's just high-rise blocks of concrete,
Yep.
where there's nothing to live for, where there's no theater. Every great civilization has had theater at its core. If you don't have that, nothing else will work.
Yep.
That's what I mean. And the human spirit will be enervated from the outset. It will be stillborn. I just think this is a message that it's going to be really hard to get across when the right are so insistent that the only important thing in life is making money, and they cannot see that an artistic enterprise that does not make money but enriches culture is far more important. I think it's the most important thing. Anyway, that's probably an impossible debate. But to come back to your question, yeah, I don't know where I stand. I'm contemplating things at the moment. I'm, I might end up relocating. Uh, I, 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 I would like things to resolve, and I would like the culture wars to come to an end. I would like all of the stuff that I've written in that book, The New Puritans, to be obsolete as quickly as possible. There are signs that it could go that way. I mean, one of the key things that has happened is the Cass review in the UK, which has absolutely sent shockwaves across the globe and has actuated a sea change, I think, in our attitudes to what they call gender affirming care. That is so deeply embedded in America and the US and Canada and Australia that I don't know how salvageable it is at this point. But actually, at one point, people are going to have to stop ignoring. I mean, you've got an activist body, WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. It's an activist body that uses its own arguments as evidence, uses its own prejudices, and calls itself the leading global authority in this area. But they still believe in gendered souls as the basis of all their medical policy. So it's still a religious cult. How you overturn that, I don't know. But Dr. Cass, who had no skin in the game, was a leading pediatric clinician, came into this with an open mind, 4 years study, produced a document saying there's no evidence at all for the efficacy of gender affirming care. We don't know why we're doing it. We don't know the dangers. There've been no studies into the dangers. The burden of proof should be on those pediatricians, those doctors, to prove that we have an innate gendered soul inside us, and that you have to modify your body to fit to closely align with it.
Or the proof that sterilizing kids, the costs outweigh the benefits. The benefits
Right.
outweigh the costs, excuse me, because there's certainly a cost.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Of course. I mean, so none of that's been done. All that's happened is that people who have raised concerns have been called bigots and transphobes and drawn and driven out of their livelihoods. So in America, it just seems completely lost at this point. Maybe that can be reversed with the Trump presidency. I don't know. He didn't do a lot of stuff last time, which he should have done. He didn't tackle big tech. He didn't tackle CRT until the very last minute,
Right.
until it was too late. Is anything going to change? I just don't know. But it's good to see various states taking the
Yes.
initiative and banning gender affirming care. I mean, how dare they? How dare anyone deprive a child of the right to go through puberty? Who the hell do they think they are?
Hi, it's Kellyanne Conway.
And I'm David Plouffe, and we have some surprising news. We're teaming up for a brand new podcast, The Campaign Managers.
I know what you're thinking. Why would Plouffe and Kellyanne do this?
Because frankly, Kellyanne, we disagree on just about every issue, except about what it takes to win a presidential campaign. Kellyanne ran Donald Trump's campaign. I ran Barack Obama's campaign. We understand things like early vote. We understand how to leverage an opportunity and how to play defense when you've made a mistake.
2024 is an election like none other. And David Plouffe and I are going to take you behind the scenes like no one else can.
We're going to lean into our one-of-a-kind experiences, really educate our listeners about what to keep an eye on, and discuss the current strategies and tactics that both campaigns are deploying on the campaign trail.
We're going to disagree, we're going to dissent, but we're going to deliver. You won't want to miss this unique pairing. Join us by listening to The Campaign Managers with Kellyanne Conway and David Plouffe.
The first episode is out May 22nd, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's get back to the show. Can I put on my tinfoil hat here?
Yeah.
At
By all
my
means.
darkest moments, I am of the belief, whether by design or otherwise, that this idea that children can consent to medical procedures that involve them, being sterilized and their body changed, all these other things, implies that they can consent to other things that the rest of us would find unconscionable. And I think you're going talk. I say it's not a slippery slope; it's an elevator shaft, and I'm very, very concerned that that's the direction this is going. And there's a lot of these whispers on the margins that I think are there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the driving intention behind it. I know a lot of people have
I
said
don't think
this.
it's a driving intention, but I'm just saying it's in the passenger seat.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the case that we've seen evidence of children being exposed to sexually explicit material in the
Right.
name of queer theory. There's no doubt about
And
that.
then told you
And
it's not happening. You're being gaslit about it. Even though here's the picture, here's the book.
yeah, quite. So I mean, it's just there. It's overt. It can't be denied, but people do continue to deny it.
Yes.
What I would say is I don't think that this is a cabal or a conspiracy of who are trying to reorganize society for their own benefit. But what I do think is that this kind of movement will attract as fellow
Yes.
travelers because
Yes.
it's obviously going to work in their interest. I think
Yes.
that's the way we should see it. Not
Yes.
that,
I agree
yeah,
with you.
yeah. I
That's
think
that
it's,
is how
I
I
think
see
it's
it.
that. I think it's that way round.
Yes, I agree, but I'm saying the fact that that's the thing that's over the hill or whatever the metaphor would be, that is people really should be, and I'll tell there was a story I just read, we'll wrap up here. There was this, a porn star who was arrested on these charges. I'm gonna use the language as liberally as I can because 'cause we're on YouTube, and whenever I hear these stories of people being arrested for watching movies that they shouldn't be watching, I'm thinking, okay, let it be like cheerleaders, their videos, underage girls, and it's infants and children tied up and things being done to them. And you're like, you might as well be an alien. Like I'm trying to meet you halfway, but this is so unconscionable, so beyond the pale that I can't even wrap my head around what your thought process is like as someone. And the fact that there's a market for this and people producing it and there's message boards, it says, and the thing that's really dark is I wish people were the media was as panicked about this as they are about climate change.
There, yeah, it is disturbing. I mean, I presume you've covered the WPATH files when they came out. That
No,
Michael
I don't think.
Schellenberg. Oh
No,
well, okay, well, okay, well, when WPATH, as you know, the world leading body of transgender health,
right?
the body that influences pretty much every other major medical institution globally, including the NHS. It's why every leading doctor related in this field says, "Oh, we do approach, we do endorse the gender affirmative care because WPATH says it's okay." But whistleblowers at WPATH leaked memos, internal documents, internal videos to Michael Schellenberger, showing that leading figures at WPATH were fully aware that children cannot consent to this treatment, but they would go ahead anyway. There are documents in there about them encouraging schizophrenics, homeless people, all sorts of vulnerable adults and kids to go onto this pathway to surgery, to have genitals removed, all this kind of stuff. And they knew they couldn't consent. They used the phrase informed consent. There's even one doctor in one of the clips sort of saying, "Yeah, these kids, they don't even have biology high school, but they don't
Right.
understand what we're saying, but we go along with it." They admit it. They also knew that gay kids are overwhelmingly represented in the people referred to pediatric gender care, and they knew that what was happening here was a kind of heterosexualization, a kind of fixing of okay. That all of this stuff was known. That was then leaked by Michael Schellenberger. It was written up in a report called the WPATH Files by a journalist called Mia Hughes, which is available online. You might not know it because American media didn't touch it. This
Yep.
is one of the biggest medical scandals of the century. The American media didn't touch it. UK media didn't touch it. I did a 2-hour special on it on my show Free Speech Nation, which is available online. I would urge people to watch it, not arrogantly because I think people should watch me, but because of the people I interview in that. I interview leading doctors, leading experts about what the significance of the WPATH files is. I have a transgender campaigner come in to give the other view. But please look at that because it matters globally what WPATH really are as this activist group. Remember, when the last WPATH standards of care, this is version 8 of their standards of care, they have a chapter on eunuchs, on eunuch identity. Here you have leading the leading practitioners in this field claiming that if someone goes to the doctor and says, I'm innately a eunuch, please remove my testicles, they should do it. That's in the WPATH Standards of Care. In the original draft version of the WPATH Standards of Care, there was a link to a website called the Eunuch Archives, which had on its site fetish porn, stories, fantasies, sexual fantasies about children being castrated for the sexual pleasure of adults. This was connected to WPATH. The link was in the original WPATH draft. It was then uploaded on an official NHS website. They only took it down when they realized the connection. WPATH have since taken that link out, but they've retained the eunuch, the notion of eunuch as a gender identity. We now know from internal leaks that there were people within WPATH saying, hang on, this is a bit much. We know that the office of Rachel Levine in the Biden administration was putting pressure on WPATH to completely remove age restrictions on surgery for youth. Right? So all of this has come out and no one's reported on it. It's absolutely insane. If you want to know more about the eunuch files, check out a website called Redux. Redux have done a lot of research into this. They've connected leading figures within WPATH to the fetishists who wrote this fantasy porn about kids getting castrated. There was even a case of actual video of a castration surgery being uploaded to this website as for pornographic pleasure. So what you say about these fellow these fetishists, these etc., piggybacking onto this movement, all of this seems very likely, given the things that I've just been talking about. And it disturbs me so much that the BBC over here in the UK, our national state broadcaster, has ignored the biggest medical scandal of the century. I wrote to them 5 times to ask why, was ignored every time. Finally got a response, and it was a boilerplate sentence, complete slap in the face, did not answer my question. I then reported on the BBC's intransigence, and then they gave me a bigger statement, which was also unsatisfactory. The BBC is completely ideologically captured on this point. They have an identity unit which influences editorial policy and will presumably veto out anything that threatens the ideology. As I've said, it's deep within the Biden administration. It's really dark. This whole area, and I understand why people go down conspiracy theory rabbit holes. I get it, because none of it makes sense otherwise.
Right.
But I think that's a temptation to be resisted. I think a lot of what's happening is there are some very dark actors within this who are intimidating and influencing other people to behave in ways that they wouldn't otherwise behave. I think that's what's happening a lot. WPATH should be disbanded right now. There's enough evidence for it to be so. Why is it not being? Why has Rachel Levine's office not been sanctioned for this? I mean, even the White House did put out a statement saying they don't approve of surgery on adolescents, but they felt compelled to do that. Why didn't the BBC mention that? What's going on? So yeah, very dark place. But I would urge caution about this secret cabal of satanic paedophiles who operate out of a pizza parlor and want to run the world. I don't.
Yeah,
think
they're in the White House and the BBC. I got to tell you, Titania's a lot funnier than you are right now.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, I didn't know.
No,
Did you want me to be a bit more lighthearted?
No, no, no. This is why, I have a very dark sense of humor and you do as well,
Yeah,
because I think all of us, and I do feel comfortable speaking for me, my audience, like I was just, as the question to this came up, and why I wrote my book, The White Pill, we're naive to the nature of evil because we assume it's just going to be like, okay, someone's a murderer. And then it's so much more sinister and so much more entrenched. And then the fact that, like, hold on a minute, if you're not a party to this, why are you covering it up? Why aren't you having a meltdown? Like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, this is, you would think that there would be histrionics and pearl clutching and like,
yeah,
I can't believe this is really happening. And it's like, yeah, we're not even going to bother to acknowledge it.
yeah. One of the tragedies of this whole cultural thing, I think, is that my faith in humanity has been horribly shaken. I think
Yes.
part of the problem, as you say, is I do have an innate assumption that people are good, not in a kind of Rousseau sense. I don't think we're born innately good and then we're corrupted by the world. But I think I just assume that people's intentions are good. And now, and I still proceed on that understanding, but I've seen so much evidence of outright evil and so much
Yeah.
evidence of complicity in evil, and it just makes me think, and the ones who stand up against it are demonized and painted as being the evil ones in society, and I've just seen it now. It's all very clear to me, and it's left me a sort of broken husk of a human being, and I hope to restore restore my humanity.
Andrew, if you ever consider moving to the States or especially Austin, you'd be welcomed here with open arms. Folks, head over to malice.locals.com where Andrew will take a few questions from supporting listeners. Andrew, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Oh, it was lovely to see you again, Michael. I think just seeing your cheeky face. I think last time I saw you was probably in Los Angeles.
Yes, with Bridget.
With Bridget, and that was the last time, I think. So that's a long time ago now. So it's always good to catch up. That's been my favorite part. Or maybe when I went on a really dark, meandering peroration about the evils of gender affirming care. That was nice and cheery, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But no, very good to see you, and it'd be, we must do this again sometime.
You are welcome.
It's summertime, and with Pluto TV's Summer of Cinema, the streaming is easy. Stream hundreds of free movies on all your favorite devices all summer long. Chill out poolside with Mission Impossible and Transformers. Or stay cool inside watching Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Titanic, or The Wolf of Wall Street. No matter your vibe, download the Pluto TV app to spend summer doing what you love. Watching endless movies. Tell me that's not the deal of the summer. Summer of Cinema on Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.